Ryan Day was on the radio today. I've got an axe to grind. Guess which one's more important? Okay, we're talking Ohio State football for the next 60 minutes. We got Steve Hellwagon right next to me, Bucknuts247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman. It's BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's the Buckeye Weekly podcast that needs to be a staple in your Ohio State content. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Excellent. Appreciate you being here. And folks, pull up a chair. You've got time to invite your friends. Bring them on in here. Leave those comments and questions. We appreciate the super chat contributions to keep us going. 267 consecutive weeks with these two and Kevin Noon as well. Steve, we'll start with you. Ryan Day appearing or being heard on 97.1 in Columbus. What's your big take?
Yeah, Coach was on the Morning Juice show with Brandon Beam and Bobby Carpenter to start out in the 8 o'clock hour. Then he held over the top of the hour and was on with Bo Bishop at 9 o'clock, and probably about 45 minutes all totaled. And a lot of good insight, a lot of good opinions, different things. He didn't talk a lot about personnel for this team. Excuse me. Coming up this season, Bo did ask him, does he have a timeline to name a quarterback? He said, I couldn't let you get away if I didn't ask you that. And, of course, Day continued with the same company line that he's been promulgating out there, that it'll happen when the time's right and when they know what they want to do at the quarterback position. On the first hour, they talked about the transfer portal a little bit. And Coach Day said that it's important all throughout spring practice that they were as transparent as they could be. And I take that to mean the position coaches on a weekly or daily basis, letting the players know where they stand and just telling them, hey, this is how it's going right now. These are the guys who are going to play, and these are the things you need to do to be a part of that group, and this is what I need to see from you. And he said that transparency is important. And as we saw, Ohio State did lose 5 or 6 guys in the transfer portal as spring wound down, and as the portal window closed, they did lose 5 or 6 guys who left. But, of course, none of those were quarterbacks, which was kind of interesting. But that was probably one of the big things he talked about. Another big thing was the jam of events that will happen in December with the signing of high school recruits, the transfer portal opening, the potential of playing a Big Ten championship game on December the 7th. And if you don't win that game, or you're not in the championship game, but you do still get in the playoff, you would have to play a playoff game on December the 20th or 21st, and then turn around and play another playoff game if you were to win that one. Or if you win the Big Ten, you would spend the whole month preparing for your first playoff game on January 1st or December the 31st. The quarterfinals would be at that point. So it makes for a very busy December around the holidays and everything else. And you just get the sense, they asked him if there was one thing you could pull out of all that, what would it be? And he said the only thing that you can pull out of that is the high school players signing. And I'm not sure if they've enacted the legislation yet or not to allow this next group, the 2025 group, to sign in August before their high school season or not. But that would alleviate a lot of the difficulty of having to go to high school in early December. Just, this is your letter of intent. This is where your signature goes. You're still planning to come to Ohio State, aren't you? All those conversations that you have to have, with the player, his third uncle, his high school coach, his fourth aunt, everybody else there at the 11th hour, when Alabama and Auburn and Clemson and Georgia are all bearing down with larger bags of money, to get that kid's signature. That's very nerve-wracking to have to go through all that stuff at one time. And to be honest with you, I think even if you did move it to August, you'd still have some squirrels who signed in August and would come to the school in December and say, look, Auburn's offering me double. I got to go to Auburn. and you have to let them out of the letter of intent, which, you have to let them out of the letter of intent these days, because if you don't, you get branded as a not good person. So I don't know. What are these letters worth anymore? There was a basketball kid, Jonathan Powell from Centerville, who had signed with Xavier long ago, and Sean Miller, and now he turns up on West Virginia's roster because Xavier, nope, coaching change. There's a new coach at West Virginia, and rejuvenated cash probably flowing through that program. But, no reason for him to rip that letter up months later. So at any rate, that was a big thing that he covered, was just how difficult December is. And if there was some football talk, I will quote him verbatim on what he said a little bit. Let's just see here about the defense and how special that could be. He said, yeah, the first thing is you've got to get the right people in the right seats. And I think we've done that. And by that, what he means is they were able to hold on to so many of those draft eligible juniors who are now sitting in the front row of the meetings and taking all the first team reps. And, they're going to comprise most of this defense. He said it started with Cody Simon coming back, and then Jack Sawyer, and then Tyleek Williams, and then JT Tuimoloau, and then Denzel Burke and Lathan Ransom. And then you mix Caleb Downs in there. And then you mix in Jordan Hancock, who is probably one of the most underrated guys on our team right now. I think he's tremendous and is going to have another great year. Then you have IGB, Davison Igbinosun. Ty Hamilton is another guy who is kind of an unsung hero on our defense, a really solid player. Then you move Sonny Styles to linebacker. You've got CJ Hicks in the mix, and Arvell Reese is coming on. So there is a lot of excitement around the defensive side of the ball. We're going to have to play with depth because it's going to be a long season. But to me, it's all about the mindset. The talent is there, and individually, that's where you try to get better in the spring. How do you get better as a player, technically and fundamentally? Because as we head into the summer, now it's about the chemistry. It's about the team coming together and building that identity. So that was what Coach had to say. He said the players at the end of the winter, spring semester, which wrapped up around April 30th, the guys got about 2 weeks off to recharge their batteries after all the finals were done with that. And a lot of them take classes during the month of May. They have a truncated semester called the May semester. The summer semester begins early June. And this is how a lot of the guys are able to graduate in 3.5 years, because they take some of these May classes and some of these summer classes. They're in school around the calendar, and helps them advance with their schoolwork, take a little bit lesser load in the fall, maybe only take 12 or 13 credit hours in the fall so they can concentrate on the season. So that was a lot of what he said. He said he noticed that the downtime for the guys and even for the coaches and everybody else is very important, because you come back from that and you truly are recharged, rejuvenated, and want to get to work. And that's what he sensed from the team since they've been back here the last several days. Coaches obviously out on the road recruiting. So I think in a nutshell, that encapsulated a lot of the top stuff that Coach Day had to say. Again, a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff about this is what we're doing now, this is why we do it, not as much about, player A, player B, player C, that type of thing.
I didn't catch all of it. I only caught a snippet of it in the car this morning, but he had said something about, like, in the next week or two, the roster will be set. Like, is that right, Steve? Like, are they still, in terms of the portal, like, he didn't speak, maybe wasn't speaking specifically about the portal, but he just said, like, in a week or two, they'll know exactly what they have or something to that effect.
Yeah. I think they're probably, Tony, what he said, this was another interesting thing, is the month of June, they will have 3 or 4 recruiting weekends where they will have official visits for kids who are going to be, I think, maybe juniors and seniors coming up next year. I don't know if juniors can do that until the following spring, but at least the 2025 guys. and any transfer portal people could make official visits in June. So I take that's what he means, is that if they're going to add any transfers, they will know about it within the next 2 to 4 weeks, who those people will be. And that will then finalize the roster for the 2024 season. If they were able, I think they can add 4 players as of right now in the portal and put them on scholarship if they want. I think they got a transfer portal punter here recently who was a walk-on, I think, for at least this upcoming year. So, that's one guy that they added, although not as a scholarship guy. But I think there'll be some movement in the portal with guys coming, to Ohio State in the next several weeks, probably.
Got some weed eating going on outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I thought I'd put myself on mute. So, Steve, you marched us through the college football playoff format and the potential schedule, whether it be for a conference championship participant or not. Ohio State has made, I believe they made half of the college football playoffs during the 4-team era, 5 of 10. I believe that was the count. They would make every playoff going back to 2005, other than the Luke Fickell year, under a 12 or 14 team playoff. So we stand at a 12-team playoff. So my question to you, of course, if they arrive at the 4-team, and based on how close they were every time they missed, you would have to think, if the program stayed on the same trajectory, that they would be in more than half the playoffs going forward, because when they missed by that much.
Yep.
Every time they were the next one out. Even if they were the 6th team, they were really the next team out. So my question to you, do you think it benefits Ohio State to be playing this 12-team playoff, even though it's almost a guarantee that they're going to be there, because the road is so daunting? There's still going to be one champion, so somebody's going to emerge regardless, but still, versus just having the 2 opponents versus this gauntlet of 3 to 4 games.
Tony, you can go ahead and hit that. I've got something I want to say about it as well. But
first, I think you have to make the playoffs if you're going to be judged to have a successful season. Making the playoffs isn't going to be enough, though, so you're going to have to be doing something with it. So in that way, it is going to make Ohio State's road tougher, because you're going to be playing more teams, and that's the difference between you're talking about 16 or 17 games this year. Generally, if you win your conference, 16 games, which is only one more game than teams have to play now. And so people are like, how can it be that much more difficult? It's only 1 or 2 more games. Why are we stressing about this? And it's only a few teams. But you don't have that 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks between the conference championship game and your first playoff game like you used to. Now you're going to have 2 weeks off to prepare. And so you're basically, it's not unlike the NFL season where it's just boom, 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 boom. You've got a bye week and then you're into it again. And so that's going to make it's harder to do. It's harder to get through. You're playing better teams, more teams, and now your schedule is backloaded with playoff teams, and you're seeing teams like Ohio State this year with the pitiful non-conference schedule, Michigan with their pitiful non-conference schedule the 2 years before that. And so you got to do what you can to make sure that you get there. But again, it's not just going to be enough to get there, and it will be harder to have I don't know, what is a successful season for a program like Ohio State? Is it making the Final Four now, because that will involve at least one playoff win? Is that the new? Can you finally put up banners for making the Final Four? Because apparently you couldn't before, because it wasn't. It's not just enough to make it. You've got to actually win a game. And now does it become something that is something you can hang your hat on?
Yeah, you raise a lot of interesting questions there. What's going to be acceptable to fans going forward? I think this season it's national championship game or bust. And if something goes wrong in that game, and they lose it, people are going to be calling for the coach's head, just as they always do. I think for the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Georgias who are in this thing on a perennial basis, when it's 4 teams, it does kind of complicate matters that it's going to be 12 teams and opens it up to some Cinderellas and some teams that ultimately, have not historically been in this position, but if they buy the right players in the portal, they can find their way in. There were examples. I went on a very deep dive the last 2 days, and I looked at the BCS years and the playoff years, a total of 26 seasons, 10 playoff seasons, and 16 BCS seasons, to plot out what a 12-team playoff would have looked like with the rules that we've been given, that the top 4 conference champions will get the first round bye. So I plotted all those out. I had to go through and figure out who won all those conference championship games, or even in years before the Big Ten had a conference championship game, who would have the tiebreaker to be the designated best conference champion from the Big Ten in that given year. Found a lot of interesting material, and I'm going to put it on our site here in the next day or so. But just as one example, Miami of Ohio with Ben Roethlisberger way back, like 2002, 2003, whatever year that was, maybe 2004, they would have been in the top 12, and they would have made the playoff as the group of 5 representative from the Mid-American Conference. And, the way they're setting this up, there's only going to be 4 power conferences going forward, but they're taking 5 conference champions automatically. The top 5 ranked college champions, conference champions, are in. So a now group of 5 conference champion is guaranteed a spot just by winning the championship. Even if they are the highest ranked team at number 20, they're going to get the 12 seed probably in this new 12-team playoff. So there was a lot of interesting stuff that I had to sift through, but that'll just tell you that one player, Ben Roethlisberger, put Miami of Ohio in that position 20-some years ago to be in a playoff, had there been a 12-team playoff. Now, you look at that. Could West Virginia, if they buy the right 3 or 4 guys, get in the 12-team playoff? Of course they could. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these perennial type powerhouse teams. I can tell you from my data that I've done, out of the 26 years, Ohio State would have made it 20 times, and their current string of 11 straight 12-team playoff appearances is the longest current active streak on my list. Georgia is next with 7 in a row, then Alabama with 4 in a row. And, of course, Ohio State would have missed it in both 2011 when they were, 6 and 7, the fickle year. In 2012, they would not have been eligible because they were, on a bowl, thing, but they had a team good enough to be in the 12-team playoff. They were in the AP poll, but they were not in the coaches poll, obviously. I'm presuming that they would not be eligible, as I presume Michigan will not be eligible for the playoff this year. Ohio State not eligible back in 2012. So I just slipped that in there. Ohio State would have made it 20 out of 26 years. That's 77%, or just shy of 4 out of every 5 years. And going back to my guarantee earlier, the one time in 5 years that Ohio State doesn't make this thing going forward, every Ohio State fan worth their salt, rank and file, will want the coach fired. So you can assure yourself of that, which I think it could happen in 2025. This mass exodus that's leaving is going to be of biblical proportions. Like 18 of the 22 starters are going to get drafted potentially. So I don't know how you put a team together in 2025 other than it's going to be a bunch of sophomores, but whatever, and transfer portal guys. Next up is Alabama, 58%, 15 out of 26. And then it goes all the way down to Georgia. Oklahoma has 15, and then Georgia at 13, 50% of the time. As we know, the first 13 years of this, Georgia was terrible. Last 13 years of this, Georgia's been pretty good. The first 13 years of this, Georgia was dominated by Florida. Last 13 years of this, Georgia's been pretty good. So that kind of covers my research on that and kind of overarching thoughts about 12-team playoff. Maybe not such a great thing if you were a 4-team playoff perennial in there every year. Interesting, out of the 26 years, Alabama would have been the number 1 seed 7 times, LSU 3 times, and then Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and USC all twice. So that'll tell you who the creme de la creme of college football has been in this modern era the last 26 years.
I would argue real quickly that once everybody leaves, Ohio State's 2025 roster is still going to be a top 3 roster in the Big Ten. And the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, are going to have a pretty good shot of making it, just depending on.
Yeah, but you got to go on the road and win at Michigan and some other. I'm sure. What?
Well, you don't have to.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you go 10-2 and take your 12 seed and take your chances.
You have to go on the road. Don't have to win.
That's going to be a fun season. I like those seasons. That's going to be a fun season. Roll the kids out there, let them go at it. They're ultra talented. See if they progress and learn and get better throughout the season. And maybe they go from being the 15th best team in the country in week 1 to one of the 3 or 4 best teams by mid-November.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite thing about college football is I know it is. It's just the new stars every single year. And when you've got a completely almost unknown roster, but that it's talented, like when who's going to be the running back, who's going to be the quarterback, they're likely going to be, whether it's Julian Saint or Aaron Noland or maybe Devin Brown sticks around or Lincoln Keenholz, it's going to be probably completely new. Is it James Peoples as your running back? Get to see more of Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate is going to be back, and Brandon Ennis, and tight ends you'll have there, and the offensive line is going to be brand new, and so good luck there. But defensive line, you'll be bringing back your Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson and Caden McDonald up front, and Hero Canoe and guys like that. And what they'll need a new middle linebacker, but they've got some in the pipeline. And I still think they'll be fine at corner even after losing Burke and IGB, because they've got young guys there as well. And you got Caleb Downs back, so and plus you've got 2 Australian punters. So I don't know what more you could want.
Can't go wrong with that.
Steve, my research reveals that Miami of Ohio would have made the 12-team playoff once out of 26 years.
That's it. Yes.
Same as the Hurricanes.
I'm just kidding. Since you told us, Steve, it was the one time, yes, I am banking on it being the one time. A couple notes from this week involving the transfer portal legend Cavazos. Why screw that name up every time? Michigan State is where he's headed, and Jihad Carter, our buddy from Syracuse, has made his way back to the ACC with NC State. The oddity about Alabama only having a streak of 4, that in 2019, if memory serves me, they were number 12, and of course you would have to make the top 11 because the group of 5 gets elevated. They were number 12 in the final regular season AP rankings, even though I and others thought that they were one of the 4 best teams in the country. Not that they earned a playoff spot, but they lost on 2 pick-sixes to Auburn and a field goal that clanked off the upright, and they lost to Joe Burrow's LSU team by 5 points. But they were only number 12 at the end of the regular season rankings.
Yeah, you have to pull Memphis up from the group below to fulfill the group of 5. And there's some anomalies here. I mean, when this started, there were Power 6 with the Big East and the Pac-12, which are both gone. Those were considered Power 6 conferences. We have contracted it down to 4, and this ACC seems like it's about to blow up at any given moment. And there's like 17 teams in the ACC. I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, it's nuts. I don't know what's going to happen with that.
I'm working on a project right now going back to the 1990s and applying some of those seasons to current times and BCS times. And there were 7 conferences because you had the Big East and you had the Southwest Conference.
Southwest,
you had 7 major conferences after 1991. All right, folks, appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. Please support what Tony's got going there with BuckeyeHuddle.com, the Buckeye Weekly podcast, And then, of course, Steve at Bucknuts 247 Sports. Yakov delving back into history as he typically does. And the anniversary is coming up of one of the most infamous events in the history of Cleveland sports. This was a nickel beer night, or I guess it was 10-cent beer night. I forget which, one or the other. Extremely cheap beer on that June night, 1974. I believe that was the Rangers and the Indians, and they had to stop the game. And on a side note, it brings to mind 1974 because I know my MVPs and my rookies of the year. Both the MVP and the rookie of the year were playing in that game, by the way. If you guys can come up with those answers, anybody in the chat.
Who were they
Tony,
playing?
Steve. It was the Rangers and the Indians, and the
Jeff
American League
Burrows?
MVP and
Jeff Burrows was the MVP.
very nice 25 home runs, 118 RBIs. Yes.
It's so obscure. I was a baseball nerd in the 70s and 80s, but that one,
Me as well.
he's
You
kind of
know
like
him well.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Dale Murphy, kind of a flash in the pan. Although Dale Murphy, had a really good career. Just that 3 or 4 years, he was that 3 or 4 years, he was one of the best players in the game, and they won't put him in the
Oh,
Hall
you're
of
talking about
Fame.
Jeff Burrows. Gotcha.
Yeah, but Jeff Burrows kind of similar to that. The rookie of the year.
He played for both teams for significant stretches of time.
Toby Harrah?
That's a good guess. He was a little bit earlier than that. Mike Hargrove.
Mike Hargrove. Oh, crap.
That's the rookie of the year that year.
Doggone it. I bet I surprised you on Jeff Burrows.
Oh, that was well done. You did surprise me. Jeff Burrows. He wore
Texas had an
glasses.
MVP in the 70s. I mean, my God. That's right in the heart of Oakland, being really, really good. And you would have thought, somebody from Oakland, Joe Rudy or, whoever. But
who was the MVP the next year? Because he was also a rookie, the only MVP to win Rookie of the Year the same year, 1975.
Fred Lynn.
Tony nailed
He
it.
won both the Rookie of the Year and the MVP?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
wow.
He had 331 that year as a rookie.
I think I only know that because of his 1984 baseball card.
Freddie Lynn. Well, I should have known that because the Reds played the Red Sox in the World Series. Yeah, Fred Lynn.
Sorry, folks. Got me started on a baseball note. Yakov, we will blame you, but we will take your super chat. We always appreciate you stopping by.
In addition to those questions, I wonder how many Cleveland fans were conceived that night after the 10-cent beer night. Most of them, a bunch of them, not most of them.
Yeah, it was quite a night. It was a little bit before my time, just a few years before I took part in.
I think I talked about this last year. The Reds were still in the hunt the last week, and they played at Cleveland. And so my daughter and son and I buzzed up to Cleveland, and we loved it. We just thought, man, what a great setting, downtown Cleveland, and bars and restaurants, and the ballpark's awesome. And we used to go to one game a year when the Reds played there for a lot of years, but it'd been a few years. It'd probably been 5 or 6 years since I've been to a game there, and just remembered how great it is. It really, for a city that never supported the team at the old stadium, boy, did they really start supporting the team when they got a new stadium. And, it's been a great 30-year ride, really, ever since then.
Yes, it has. 1994 was the opening of Jacobs Now Progressive Field. Speaking of stadium atmospheres, Joel Klatt came out with this sometime this week, and we discussed this on the Iowa channel because, as you can imagine, they were quite upset about being left off of the top 5. So, Steve, you've been to all these stadiums. Tony, I believe you've been to just about all of these stadiums, certainly the 3 of the 5. So you guys can speak to this better than most. The top atmosphere. So before you guys cut loose on this, I'm thinking we're not rating tailgating. This is Joel Klatt. He's in the booth. I'm guessing we're talking strictly about attendance and the rabid nature of the fans. That's what I would think.
Yeah, I have been, there's 18 teams in the conference now, and I have been to a game at 17 of the 18 teams. I have not been to a game at Oregon. Would have gone a few years ago, but COVID canceled it. And obviously now planning to be there in October. I'm going to make myself at home. I'm flying out Thursday and flying back Monday, like a 4-day trip. It's going to be quite an excursion out there to the West Coast, but looking forward to it. I think Ohio State and Penn State could be neck and neck. Penn State is just so off the chain for that whiteout thing that you could make a case for them, but Ohio Stadium for a big game, there's just not many better places really in the world to watch college football. So, I'm biased. I've been to, 30, 40, almost 40 years. I've probably been to over 200 games at Ohio Stadium. I've probably been to about 10, maybe 15 at Penn State. You could make a case for either one of them. Let's just say they're 1 and 1A. They're the clear leaders in the clubhouse on this, and there's nobody really particularly close. I think Wisconsin for a night game and jump around is pretty cool, and everything that goes on around the games up there with the bars right basically next door to the stadium, there are bars. That's pretty cool. Great setting. I think Nebraska, the 300 and some consecutive sellout streak that they've had speaks for itself. In the last 15 years, as bad as the football has been at Nebraska, for them to support the team to the level that they do, and when something happens in that stadium, it gets electric. I mean, that one's in the top echelon. Michigan, there have been so many historic games played there. It's not a particularly nice place. It's not, and again, I have been to maybe 10 or 15 games there. And when we go there, it's the end of November. It's usually 30 degrees, and about half the time it's snowing. So to me, it's a dark, dire, awful place. I mean, that's my thought of walking into Michigan Stadium. It's like, oh my God, this is awful, but it's the embodiment of Big Ten football too, Woody and Bo, all those historic games that happened on that field, and they've played there, forever. There's history there. It's the Big House. It's the largest stadium in the country, so it deserves its credit. Big Ten atmosphere, as far as an atmosphere, I don't put it up there with, any of those other four I mentioned before that. Iowa's pretty special, I think. They support the team. Keith Jackson called them the Bumblebees. The fans show up in their yellow and black, regardless of whether the team's 3-9 or 9-3. So those are the top ones. Of the ones outside the Big Ten that are coming in, Washington, to me, of the three I've been to, is probably the best. Just the setting on the lake there, and people ride their boats up, and it's a great football stadium. It really is. The UCLA, you get to play at the Rose Bowl, which is the greatest setting, for a college football bowl game, probably even a college football game in the world. That January 1st afternoon at the Rose Bowl, it's a magical time, no doubt about it. Is it great for UCLA games? No, not really, because you're playing UCLA. Nobody cares about UCLA. So it's just kind of whatever. I mean, in a city with, like 10 pro teams and USC, they're like the 15th option, so just kind of take that with a grain of salt. My experiences at the Coliseum is it's in a terrible neighborhood, and it's a dilapidated dump. And I know USC and the city have spent a lot of money to upgrade it. And whenever we go back there again, I'll be interested. Haven't been there since 2008, I think. So that's been almost 16 years now. I haven't been there, but it was a dump in 2008, and it was a dump in 1989. I think I went there for a game, and it was a total dump then. So you just have to think about the history there, the Olympics, the World Series, the Super Bowl, the first one, and USC and UCLA, the Rams, the Raiders have all played games there. So much history involved in that stadium. And the USC band is obviously a great attraction as well. But, you know, I don't know, just kind of whatever on that. So the bullshit you have to go through to get to that place, the traffic, it's just go early, plan to stay late. And the same thing with the Rose Bowl, go early, plan to stay late because the traffic's miserable trying to get in and out of either one of those places in LA.
Or have a helicopter.
Yeah.
I've been to the Rose Bowl a few times. I thought the atmosphere has always been great, but it's Ohio State fans there, so it's probably not
Utah fans that last time they took that thing over.
It was good. But if you're looking at these rankings, like you got to figure it in with a big game, because all of these places can be quiet at noon against Akron.
Yeah.
I don't often see lists like this with Michigan on them from people who have been to all of these stadiums, which Joel Klatt has. And I would say Michigan's gotten better for sure than over the last few years. Call it the Connor Stallions effect if you want. I don't know. But with the winning, the fans have gotten happier, and so they get louder. Wisconsin should be on here somewhere. Those people are crazy. Iowa was amazing in 2017 against Ohio State. That crowd was awesome, and Nebraska is always great. And so it's to see a top five. Obviously, you can only have 5 on a top 5, but leaving those 3 teams out is right away. Those are 3 of the ones that I think of. But I also know that Outson is crazy. I've heard great things about Washington. I'm looking forward to getting to Oregon this year to experience that. But Wisconsin needs to be on this list. I don't know that Penn State is number 1, although it's just understood. And I wonder if maybe it needs to be debated more eventually, because it's just, it's the whiteout game against Ohio State every 2 years, and it's the best atmosphere. It's at night, and all of the ingredients are there to be an incredible crowd. Whereas if you bring in a top 5 team to any of these stadiums at night, it's going to be an incredible crowd as well. So I'm not going to get too upset with this list. I think if Wisconsin was better, then they would be on this list, because that's one of the first places I always think about in terms of the Big Ten and the crowd. And maybe it was because I was in the stands in 2010 for Wisconsin beating Ohio State, ranked number 1, seeing the crowd rush the field, being there, helping people onto the field so they don't get hurt. And then, as Steve said, they shut down like the entire area around. Like there's no cars, you're just walking. And it's like if they shut down High Street from traffic, and you could just walk from place to place. And it's just, I kept referring to it afterwards, like it's the most college town I've ever been to. So Wisconsin has a lot going for it.
I think Michigan State would probably be the last of the top half of this, and that's if they have a good team and it's a night game or a 3:30 game and it's an important game. It's a great campus too, a lot of trees, and there's a river that runs through the middle of campus. It's not a huge river, but you do have to cross a bridge to get over from our parking to the stadium. It's a short walk through the campus, and it's just very scenic. And I think for big games, it can be very good. Then as you get into the bottom half of this, there are some that are okay, and some that, I really don't care if I ever go back there. This whole thing going away from East-West, when they went to East-West, it put Illinois and Purdue in the other division, which meant that Ohio State would only go there like twice a decade at the most. And I was perfectly fine with that. I was like, we're trading West Lafayette and Champaign every other year for trips to Washington, D.C., to Maryland, which Maryland, for those who don't know, is closer to Washington, D.C. than it is to Baltimore. It's right outside Washington, D.C. It's 5 miles from Washington, D.C. It's about 45 miles up the freeway to Baltimore. And then Rutgers, New York City. The first few times we went to Rutgers, we always made a side trip into New York City. Now we don't bother with that. We just hang around in New Jersey. We found bars and restaurants to hang out at New Jersey and get good food, et cetera, the night before. And so now that we're going away from East-West and you're going to play basically a random computer-generated you're going to have one West Coast trip every year to one of those four. And then you're just going to always play Michigan. And then everything else is going to be computer generated, rotated as best they can. I'm okay with that. I don't really need to ever go back to Rutgers or Illinois really ever again. Those are probably two that I probably never, ever need to go and see a game at ever again. I think Illinois is kind of cool because of it's like Soldier Field with the concrete colonnades and all that. And that Red Grange and Dick Butkus played there, but nobody close to Red Grange or Dick Butkus has played there in the last 60 years. So that kind of makes it, anticlimactic going over there. And then Indiana is kind of down there at the bottom of the list. The traffic trying to get in and out really sucks. So those three I'd put down, toward the bottom. I kind of like Northwest. It's kind of like Wrigley Field. You're in a neighborhood. You can walk to the game, etc. In this neighborhood, and if they have a good team and maybe a night game, then it kind of perks up. I was also there when it was 52-3 a few years ago, and it wasn't any good at all. But what can you do? They kind of run hot and cold there at Northwestern with their teams, and they're renovating and putting in what looks like. It looks to me, Tony, like, in Columbus, we have the Columbus Crew Stadium, lower.com field. It looks like that's exactly what they're doing with Ryan Field, is kind of building this thing where a lot of the seats will have a cover over them and maybe be a hole in the roof overhead where the field is what it looks like to me. And they'll be able to do events beyond just football there at Ryan Field. It'll become more of a venue as well. So, it's a couple of years out. I guess they're going to play at Wrigley Field this year, which I have been wanting that. They started playing games at Wrigley Field in the late 2000s. I think they started playing like an Illinois game there occasionally and some other schools. And I'm excited, to get to go do that. That'll be great. But then the rest of the schools, Maryland, I don't mind. If Maryland had a good team, it'd be fun. Minnesota's new stadium is great. I mean, it's a fabulous football stadium to go watch a game. If they had great teams, I'm sure it'd be wonderful. Purdue is okay when they've had good teams for night games, and they've upset Ohio State several times here in the last 25 years. And those have always been kind of off the chain and that type of thing. So I think that hits just about all 18 of them, I think. I don't know if there's one I left out, but yeah, there's a lot of very good, a lot of good, and only a few that, again, I never, ever really need to go back to Illinois, Rutgers, or Indiana for football. I really, if I never go back to those three for football, it's nothing against the people. It's just, there's no point. There's really no point to it.
I will say, totally kind of off the subject, but not, Indiana's postgame is fantastic. It's a nice big room. And
yes,
if every school could do that, that would be appreciated. I would love that.
They're better prepared than a lot of the places we go. Better prepared than Penn State. I have to think some of the other ones. Illinois, certainly, they're better prepared than Illinois. Better prepared than Purdue. Better prepared than Rutgers. Better prepared than Maryland. My God, there's 5 really, really bad. 5 really, really bad post games. But
do stuff outside at Maryland.
Yeah, just ridiculous. Some of these places, like, we're paying all of your freaking bills. Can you at least just build a freaking room? We'll give you $100,000. Just build one room with some ventilation and some audio hookups. A 40 by 40 room. Just a good sized room with some chairs. We're not asking for the world. We're not asking, just a nice sized room that we can operate in. Please. I mean, you're making millions of dollars. We're paying you millions and millions of dollars. We're paying every one of your bills. Please, just put a room in, please.
Folks, we appreciate you stopping by. We do this each and every week with Steve, with Tony, and typically with Kevin, right here at the Voice of College Football. So again, we appreciate you stopping by. We're in the midst of unveiling our series all-time program rankings. We have delivered every conference except the Big Ten. We hope to get to the Big Ten today, and it's an exhaustive look at these programs. So if you have found a more extensive, exhaustive, comprehensive list of factors, then you send it to me, because I haven't seen anything like this, and I'm a database of one. I'm not saying it's a perfect system. It's not, but at the same time, it's pretty darn good. But in the midst of doing so, it was reminded to me that Michigan officially leads the all-time series against Ohio State 61-51, and however many ties, I believe 6. And at one point, I'm going to deliver my look back at the history of how that series has been compiled, but we will do that at another time because it's one way to look at it. So in 2010, Ohio State defeated Michigan 37-7. That is a 50-second win that should be counted back to Ohio State's ledger clearly. So recently, Reggie Bush received back his Heisman Trophy. I'm not going to go into the circumstances involving Reggie Bush, but based on today's rules, today's approach, what happened back in 2003, 2004 is fine. Similarly, but actually not affecting the play on the field. So this is how I separate this Ohio State incident in 2010. And if there's anybody watching or listening that doesn't know what happened, 5 Ohio State players were suspended for the 2011 season, or the first, I believe, 6 games of the season for 2011 for awards, trinkets, accomplishments that they received for Big Ten championship win over Michigan, Sugar Bowl championship in 2010. And so those players that broke the rules of the NCAA, which are, we can argue all day on whether the rules are valid. I do think that there's legitimacy to having these collegiate players keep their trophies, at least through their eligibility. Then they can do whatever they want after their eligibility runs out. But I don't think it's that much to ask that they keep their trophies, at least for the duration of the time that they are in school, and that they honor those trophies and don't hand them out to anybody on the street or do whatever they want with them, get tattoos. But at the same time, those individual players, they were penalized for the issues involved. And I understand Jim Tressel had knowledge of the situation, and therefore he represents the school, and the school was penalized with the vacated wins, 12 of them, and a Big Ten championship and a Sugar Bowl championship and a win against Michigan. And I am not completely in the camp of vacated wins solving everything. A lot of people think that they shouldn't even exist. That should not be a penalty. And I do agree that they penalize a lot of innocent people. Anytime you vacate wins and take away wins and championships from innocent people that had nothing to do with the infractions. However, if there was cheating involved that resulted in wins, then I believe that's a fair punishment, because you did something to cheat the system, whether that's you passed players that shouldn't have been passed in terms of classwork, or you induced them to campus when that was against the rules so that they could be eligible and play for your team, and then they went out and won games, or you spied, whatever you did to achieve these victories, then the vacated wins, in my estimation, applies. However, we're talking about players who were eligible that won the games, and then after the fact broke NCAA laws, rules, and sold their awards but the wins were already achieved by eligible players. Therefore, when are these wins going to be reinstated? Because it's such a farce. The team went
I
12
agree.
and 1. They won the Sugar Bowl. They won the Big Ten championship.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. You probably take each of these cases on a case by case basis. And, you know, uh, I would agree. There are some people in our profession who will write about the Michigan rivalry and just quote the number that was actually played on the field. And then the schools will sometimes one school will produce one number and the other school will produce another number. Ohio State has to produce the number that says that the win in 2010 was vacated. Whereas, sometimes Ohio State will play schools that produce the overall number, even including Ohio State beating them that year. So, there's a lot of discrepancies in that regard of who pays attention to what. But, who writes the history, I don't know. It's all kind of, I write it one way and somebody else writes it another. Sometimes I'll put the disclaimer in there that, the 2010 win that they had was vacated and not included in this total, or this total does include the 2010 win that officially was vacated by NCAA sanctions. The whole thing, here we are, it's 2024, it's 14 years later, and it doesn't change anything. It doesn't award anybody a championship or anything like that because of it. So, I don't know. I'm just of a mind that I don't like the people who were not impacted by that, who weren't involved in the wrongdoing, were impacted by that and have had kind of their legacies questioned or whatever, or their accomplishments questioned. Oh, you only beat Michigan twice. Well, no, we beat them 3 times. They're just not counting the third one, or whatever it was. So, I don't agree with that. I think people who were innocently involved in this, it shouldn't be that big a thing. I think about, Chris Carter took money from an agent and was ruled out for the, part or all the 87 season. And he declared for the supplemental draft and he left Ohio State. And it took a few years for him to be welcomed back. He was persona non grata for a while. They said that Ohio State had to disassociate itself from Terrell Pryor for 5 years. They could not have him. And I don't know if it was he was banned from campus or what, but what a bunch of dumbassery. He's an American citizen. I'm an American citizen. He didn't break any laws or anything. It just, the whole thing is just so stupid. And not only that, I think about, Chris Carter, as his life has gone on, has been a mentor to any number of young people. And I think if Terrell Pryor was in the same, frame of mind or same place of his life, to where he was comfortable sitting down with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids and saying, you got to understand, what you're getting here is not real, that there is going to be a day, comes up where reality is going to hit you in the face. And that's what you need to prepare for. Then if he wants to bring that message to somebody at Ohio State or anybody anywhere, if he's comfortable and in the place of his life, he wants to do that, they should take full advantage of that. So, and I'm not saying that that's been discussed or debated, but he should be welcomed back with everybody else. They won the Rose Bowl with him. If they do a reunion, he should be allowed to come back just like everybody else. And, it just, we're all people, that's just kind of my feeling on it. And I just, I don't see the point in making a big deal about it, 15 years later. It doesn't change the rest of my day today. I'm going to go get lunch and, go figure out something to do with the rest of my day. I wasn't directly involved though. So, it's maybe different for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. We are all just people and it doesn't impact us. So it's like the wins aren't going to change who they are if you give the wins back. Reggie Bush, that's a Heisman thing. OSU getting those wins back, that's an NCAA thing. I think they're two completely different things. And in terms of impacting people who didn't do anything, Gene Smith kind of impacted the entire 2012 team by not punishing the players who had done wrong by the NCAA, or by choosing not to opt out of a bowl, choosing not to implement a bowl ban, a self ban. You're risking the entire next season. And so I think Jim Tressel does not. I don't think he loses sleep over this. He's always been like, football is one part of what he does, and then it's never been like what identifies him, basically. And so he can move on while still remaining connected. Like he doesn't go crazy like some other former coaches that I won't mention, but you can look at the larger picture and just think about, what kids were helped, what did we leave behind, and what did we put forward. And, with reinstating wins, I think what little power the NCAA has, when you're picking up the scabs of the NCAA, I think there are much more important things to pick at. And where does it stop then, Mark? And is it just wins, and is it everybody's vacated wins, as long as there's no cheating? Like I don't have a problem with that 2010 season being wiped away. I will say that this is the 120th game coming up, Ohio State and Michigan, and Ohio State lists the series as 61, 51, and 6. Michigan, in their game notes last year, had it 61, 52, and 6. So they still credit Ohio State with a win. And so if you want, just read the Michigan game notes, and you'll see that 52nd win in there, and they haven't removed that yet. So,
well, it annoys me on two fronts. Steve addressed one, and that's that the players involved, 95 players involved that have nothing to do with the situation, they officially don't have those wins, don't have a Sugar Bowl championship, don't have a win against Michigan, don't have a share of the Big Ten championship, all those things that they can't officially lay claim to. And number two, we all delve all off season in these all-time rankings and lists and compilations of numbers of wins and winning percentage and Big Ten championships and all of that. Well, you're taking a 12-1 season away from a team. Well, you're giving them the loss, but they're taking away 12 wins that at this point are pretty decisive in all-time winning percentage. And that should continue on and on in regards to just, again, playing catch up as this program is in terms of Big Ten championships, although they've got more Big Ten championships since joining the Big Ten than Michigan does. That never gets brought up.
Well, it's because it puts Ohio State in a good light, Mark. You wouldn't want that. Not you, other people.
So that was my axe to grind. And I will grind it at other occasions, I'm sure, at some point. All right. Tony, what's going on with you this week?
We released a Michigan Monday podcast on Monday because we had a listener question asking us about how Sherrone Moore has done to this point, what we thought, and could he keep Michigan to the level that Jim Harbaugh raised them. So we discussed that on Monday's show. So you can find that on all of your podcast platforms of choice, the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. And of course, you can always find me at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
How confident, Tony, are you that Ohio State will have the best record in this conference over the next 5 years?
Over the next 5 years, pretty confident. When was the last time that they didn't? What 5-year stretch have they not? Like, how far do you have to go back? Is it to the late 90s, early 2001-ish? But even then, you're talking that was John Cooper's era, the mid to late 90s. So that's sounds like a research project for one of you two to find out the last time the Ohio State for a 5-year running, time frame did not have the best record in the Big Ten. And Michigan, they've got a chance here in the next couple of years, but you've got that 2020 season. And I will say this, the last thing, because I know Michigan fans love to hear about Connor Stallions. The 35 games with Connor Stallions on the sideline, Michigan averaged 24 points more per game than their opponents. The 35 games before that, before he got onto the sidelines, Michigan averaged 8 points per game more than their opponents. So there's only a swing of three times that number. So just data, information. That's all. No feelings, just information. Just coping. And last thing, and I've said this before, when you say cope harder, that is a huge coping mechanism. Just so you know. Have a good day.
Steve, you can say whatever you want after that.
Let's see. As I said, I've got this project I'm cooking up, looking at the last 26 years to give you an idea who've been the dominant college football programs in the modern era. It's a lot of the usual suspects: Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma. They're the top 4, at least in 12-team playoff appearances, and then it kind of goes down from there. Clemson, beginning in 2010, was a powerhouse. Obviously, prior to that, not so much. So, I think that's going to be on my docket coming up. I got some other things that I want to do as well. And my wife is calling me, so I just hit the no button on that. And then I'm going to Indianapolis this weekend for a basketball tournament. The Nike EYBL will be out there, so we'll be covering some of the top basketball prospects that Ohio State's looking at out there. And my daughter, Lindy, is graduating from Miami. She'll be my 3rd college graduate offspring. And last, I'm going to bat 1,000 on college graduates. And that's on Saturday. And so we'll be down there in Oxford for that and moving her out of her apartment on Sunday. So what an enjoyable, exciting time this is.
Speaking of your daughter's accomplishment, and congratulations to Lindsay, and pairing that with our baseball conversation before, it brings me to what I believe is the best batting average of all time, Tom Pashorik's brother. I can't remember his first name. In the early 60s, went 5 for 6 at the end of one season and never played again. I believe that's the best batting average of all time.
Wow.
So not quite your 3 for 3, Steve, but 5 for 6 for Tom Pashorik's brother.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Tony, appreciate you being here, doing this each and every week. You as well, Steve. You guys know that. Follow Steve at Bucknuts and Tony at Buckeye Huddle and the Buckeye Weekly podcast, everyone. And we'll see you back here next week.